Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. In this week's video, we're in session number 6. This is our 6th and final session of our ongoing series entitled Update on the QME Regulations. And if you've been with us throughout the course of this past 6 weeks, we've had now plenty of time to be able to consider these new proposed changes. And it's very interesting as the stakeholders in the system continue to dissect the language of these new proposed changes. We're beginning to be able to envision how these new proposed changes, should they come to pass as they are written. And I'm going to go on record as saying I fully expect these changes to be enacted into law as they are written, perhaps with the small exception of some slight massage of some of the language of a few select passages from these regulations. I fully expect these regulations to pass because it's clear if you read these regulations carefully that the purpose of these new proposed changes is to improve the system as we know it, and we're starting to be able to envision some of those improvements and how those improvements are going to manifest both in the face-to-face evaluation and also in our QME reports. And the overriding theory and the overriding theme behind these new proposed changes are just that, to improve the qualified medical evaluation, both as it relates to our face-to-face interaction with the injured worker and also in the final production of our reports, such that our reports are more user-friendly, are more usable, and are more capable of resolving disputes in the workers' compensation system. So how could you have any fault, or how could you have any objection to that? The purpose of these changes are to improve the system. So let's just review where we've come from so far in this program. In session number 1, I gave you an overview of some of the most important changes that are going to impact the day-to-day operations of you as a qualified medical evaluator. And I skimmed the surface and touched upon what I consider to be the most significant of the changes that are going to affect us as qualified medical evaluators. Now, in session 2, I spent quite a bit of time talking about scheduling appointments and what the law, the regulations that is, have to say about scheduling of QME appointments. And I gave you some twists and some nuances as to how you can best assure that when you schedule an appointment for a QME evaluation, that scheduled appointment has the highest probability of being a compensable, reimbursable, quickly reimbursable appointment for you. In other words, when we receive appointment requests over the phone, those requests rank on a scale from low quality appointments to moderate quality appointments to high quality appointments. And the difference between these appointments is that a low quality appointment has a high probability of canceling, rescheduling, and creating red flags and problems for you that make it difficult for you to get paid on that evaluation, whereas a high quality scheduled appointment is just the opposite. It has a high probability of being a good appointment that keeps, the examinee shows on time, and you get paid on time. So appointment quality ranges from low to high. And I shared with you several ideas as to how to schedule high quality appointments. And before we move on today, I just want to spend a little bit more time encouraging you to not schedule low quality appointments. You must go through the procedure that I laid out for you in session number 2, because otherwise you're going to be ending up spinning your wheels and spending a lot of unprofitable time considering, thinking about, preparing for, administering appointments that aren't appointments at all. Now, you might think that I'm exaggerating, but it's my estimation that only about 65% of even high quality appointments keep. So if you schedule appointments without consideration at all to the quality of the appointment, your percentage is going to be much, much lower, and you're going to be wasting unnecessary time scheduling appointments that aren't appointments at all. Now, I have to tell you that I've learned this procedure through the School of Hard Knocks, and what I want to show you here is a stack of recent appointments that have not kept, that have canceled, that have been objected to by one or more of the parties. And what I'm showing you here is 19 folders, and on top of the 19 folders are a stack of other evaluations that we have put time, effort, energy, staff resources, and money into that did not keep at all. And even these were high quality appointments to begin with. So you must go through this procedure. Otherwise, your percentages are going to be much lower than even 65%, and that's just unacceptable. So on this appointment, this is an appointment that we went and set up. We spent all the time getting it in the system. The staff massaged the file, and we learned that we received a letter from the defense attorney, which advised us that they were obtaining a replacement panel. They weren't happy with the strike, and they were ordering a replacement panel. So there's a reason why appointments don't keep. This one here says the defense attorney actually did not strike, and that they were still going through the striking procedure, and that the applicant attorney jumped the gun without giving the defense attorney the opportunity to strike. And as it turns out, the defense attorney actually struck me off of that panel. So that represented a low quality appointment. Here we have a panel and some demographics, and it says, this is from the defense attorney. My office has sent objection to the medical unit regarding the specialty on this claim. And so that appointment was canceled. This one objecting to the specialty. This one says simply defense objecting, do not cancel. And so these are appointments that we made, but we did not put a lot of work into, but the appointment did not keep. So those represent only minor losses. These ones, on the other hand, you can see the various thicknesses of these files. These represent files that we have a lot of work into that we should not have invested the time, effort, energy, or staff resources into those appointments. So I'm encouraging you to schedule only high quality appointments and let the others follow their natural path down into nothingness. In sessions 3 and 4, we talked about anti-bias training and the regulations that are going to govern the DWC's new position on anti-bias in the QME evaluation, and I'll have much more to say about that in the future. And then in our last session, we talked about the evaluation and reporting guidelines, and we talked about some of what the Division of Workers' Compensation considers to be a high-quality report and how you can restructure your QME report writing process from where it is now to where it needs to be in order to satisfy the Division of Workers' Compensation that your report is a quality report that can be used to resolve the issues. Now remember, the purpose of these new proposed changes to the QME regulations is in large part an effort by the Division of Workers' Compensation to improve the content and quality and usability of QME reports. And in this section, we talked about what it is specifically that are extracted from this larger list of 20 reasons that the Division of Workers' Compensation relies upon to identify bad apple qualified medical evaluators that need to be extricated from the system. So the first is participating in 3 or more instances of activity during the most recent period of appointment, the most recent 2-year period of appointment, that constitute a failure to communicate with the injured worker in a respectful, courteous, and professional manner. Now, all injured workers deserve to be communicated with and treated courteously, respectfully, and professionally. And if the injured worker makes a report that you are failing to behave appropriately and professionally as a qualified medical evaluator, and if you accumulate 3 such instances, that could constitute a grounds for denial of your reappointment. So I'm encouraging you to take a moment at the beginning of each evaluation and remind yourself to be courteous, to be professional, to be respectful, and to treat injured workers carefully, and to not at any time or in any way be perceived as unprofessional and or cavalier, because injured workers are paying attention. And injured workers are going back and they're reporting to other parties about their evaluation. They're reporting to their family, they're reporting to their applicant attorney, they're reporting to the claims administrator, and you always want to be the recipient of a good report about your courtesy and professionalism. Okay? Number 2, when the qualified medical evaluator is identified as one who participates in any intentional act that is not a necessary part of the physical examination and causes physical harm or injury to the injured worker, this can constitute a grounds for denial of reappointment. Now, physical harm or injury could also be perceived as a psychologic injury or psychologic harm to the injured worker. So again, it's very important that you be very, very careful, very, very deliberate, and very, very targeted and focused in your physical examination with the injured worker, such that your physical examination does not include anything unnecessary to the evaluation of the issue that's in dispute. The issue that's in dispute is the focus of your evaluation, and anything that strays beyond the focus of the evaluation is unnecessary. So you want to make sure that your physical examination is exactly targeted to the disputed issue and that it causes no injury or physical or psychological harm to the examinee. Okay? And then finally, and this ties directly into our earlier discussion about the anti-bias training, a qualified medical evaluator who fails to render expert opinions or conclusions without regard to an injured worker's race, sex, national origin, religion, or sexual preference will be replaced by the administrative director. And this is new. This is new language in the QME regulations as we know them. This is being proposed for the first time to be included in the new QME regulations, and this is part and parcel of the division's new focus on bias in the medical legal evaluation. So they want us as qualified medical evaluators to render our opinions and conclusions first and foremost in the body of our report, and then to step back and look at our opinions and conclusions with an objective eye and confirm that those opinions and conclusions are not in any way influenced by implicit biases, stereotypes, preconceived notions, okay, any of these things about the injured worker's race, about the injured worker's sex, or about any of these other targets of bias. In other words, the intention of the Division of Workers' Compensation is to ensure that all injured workers are treated fairly and accurately regardless of any of these issues, such that all persons are treated the same. They're all treated accurately without biases to any of these particular targets. Now, the Division of Workers' Compensation has a method of ensuring ensuring that you give this full consideration with each and every evaluation. So what is that method? How is it that the Division of Workers' Compensation intends to ensure that we as qualified medical evaluators render opinions and conclusions without bias or stereotypes based on the injured worker's race, sex, national origin, or all these things? How does the division intend to do that? Well, for the first time in all of recorded history, the new proposed QME regulations are going to require that we add a new additional declaration to our report. This is a declaration that will go at the end of the report along with all of the other declarations that are required. And this one will be a declaration that will read something such as the following. It'll say, I, John Smith, MD, QME, declare under penalty of perjury that I did not discriminate in any way against the parties to the action or the injured worker in the evaluation process or in the content of the report. So with this declaration, the Division of Workers' Compensation takes bias against the injured worker to another level and requires that we consider any potential bias that we may have to one or more of the parties to the action. And this is new, and this is going to be a sock in the gut for many qualified medical evaluators who fashion themselves as either applicant-oriented qualified medical evaluators or defense-oriented qualified medical evaluators, or I'll have sometimes qualified medical evaluators tell me that they hate this particular insurance company or they hate this particular claims examiner. And we have all of these experiences that have left us with stereotypes and biases, and the Division of Workers' Compensation hopes to lavage those from us, to extricate those from us by requiring us to include this declaration in the body of our report. And in my opinion, this is a very, very good thing. This is a fantastic, fabulous, innovative step by the Division of Workers' Compensation that's going to result in more accuracy in the QME's opinions and conclusions. And that's all the parties in the system crave, which is accuracy. Nobody in the system has any objection to opinions and conclusions that are accurate. And this is one way that the division is planning to attempt to improve the content and quality of QME's reports by eliminating the biases so prevalent in nearly each and every one of those QME reports. So this is part of the Division of Workers' Compensation's anti-bias effort, and this is the knockout punch. This is their knockout punch. They're going to require this declaration to be included with each and every report, and that's a good thing. So doctors, if you can behave professionally, courteously, and respectfully with each and every injured worker evaluation, if you can not engage in unnecessary examination procedures but simply target your physical examination to the issue in dispute, and if you can render opinions and conclusions that are fair and accurate to all persons, you can be assured that your reappointment will be smooth and unencumbered. On the other hand, if you find that you sometimes have a tendency to opine with bias or engage in cavalier and or casual behavior with the examinee, these are things that you can easily, quickly rectify in order to more in order to better satisfy the Division of Workers' Compensation's intent of improving the content and quality of QME reports. Okay? So these are things that you have direct control over, and I'm encouraging you to take a look at your evaluations and comport them with these new regulations. Okay? So now let's talk about some good news with regards to the submission of our reports and the Division of Workers' Compensation's new regulations that deal with electronic submission. Okay, so let's talk about electronic submission of our reports. And even before we get into that, let's talk about the conventional paper submission of our reports. Now, in my office, we, up until now, have been submitting our reports by paper and through snail mail. So that procedure involves printing out 4 to 5 copies of the report, 4 to 5 copies, claims administrator, applicant attorney, defense attorney, different address of the billing company, a separate report for the billing company, and 1 report for our own file. That's as many as 5 copies of a report. And let's say the report is 40 pages. Let's just use that as a representative report. That's 200 pages of copy paper, and the time that it takes to print those out from the copy machine. Now, I have a high-speed, high-volume copy machine, but even still, it takes quite a bit of time to print 200 pages of 5 reports. In addition to the 5 reports, we include a copy of the examinee's sign-in sheet. To document the face-to-face time, there's 5 copies. We include copies of any cover letters that we receive from the parties, so that can be as many as 10 to 20 pages with 2 cover letters. 10 pages each would be 20 pages. Times 5 copies is 100 pages. We include any x-ray or diagnostic study reports. And so there's pages, 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 and time involved in the production of all these copies. In addition to that, each of these has to be stuffed into a 9x12 manila envelope, which costs money. Each of these have to be sealed with Scotch tape, which costs money and takes time to do. Each of these have to be affixed with postage, typically in the range of $4, $5, or $6 per envelope. And then, probably worst of all of these have to be taken to the post office, which for me is about a 30-minute round trip down a 1-lane road, bumpy, potholed 1-lane road. And not everyone has this, but the point I'm making to you is that paper copies are expensive, time-consuming, and cumbersome. And so the new electronic submission of records, I calculate by my own calculations, is going to save roughly $16 per evaluation. That's just in the copy costs, paper costs, and postage costs of submitting 4, well, printing 5, but submitting and mailing 4 copies of a 40-page report. Is going to save $16 just in costs. So now under the new flat rate fee schedule, costs are more important than ever, and this represents a significant cost savings, especially across a number of examinations annually, okay? In addition to the cost, it saved tremendous time in putting together all these packages and taking all these packages down to the post office. So in my opinion, electronic service of records is a great innovation that's going to greatly reduce our costs and greatly simplify the whole bulky, cumbersome procedure of getting these reports in the mail. So let's talk about electronic submission of our reports. This is described in CCR 36.7, and there they tell us that by electronic service, what they mean is they mean service of the medical legal report and all documents required by Section 36, such as the QME summary form, the employee disability questionnaire, the request for summary rating determination, and any other required documentation being submitted by either electronic transmission or electronic notification. And these are different, and we'll define those in just a minute. Now, the electronic service may be performed directly by the physician, and that's how we do it here in our office. We submit those directly, or by an agent of the physician, or through an electronic service provider. So probably for most of you, you're going to be directly serving the electronic documents through your office, and so this will apply to you, but other more higher volume agencies may use an electronic service provider. Okay, so what's the difference between electronic service and electronic notification? Okay, so let's define these terms. So electronic transmission which is to be distinguished from electronic notification. What that means is, it means the transmission of a document by electronic means to the electronic service address at or through which a party or other person has authorized electronic service. So there's a couple of key words here. First of all, the person has to have authorized electronic service. Second is that there may be a specific electronic service address that the party requires that the QME report be submitted to. So always ask for the email address at which the party will agree to accept electronic submission of the report. And this email address may be different from the personal email address at which the party receives their personal or business-related communications. It may be entirely a different address, and this email address may differ also for the billing compared to the claims administrator. There may be separate email addresses for both of those submissions. So this is part of your intake interrogatory, is to get, number one, authorization for electronic submission, and then all of the necessary email addresses that would be required for the electronic submission. Okay, on the other hand, electronic notification, this means not the transmission, but it means the notification of the party or other person that a document is now served by sending an electronic message to the electronic address at or through which the party or other person has authorized electronic service, specifying the exact name of the document served and providing a link at which the served document may be viewed and downloaded. So electronic notification tells the party that, hey, my report is done, it's now available to retrieve the report and all the associated documents. Click the link below, and that link allows them to download the copy of the report from some cloud storage service, and they can then have the electronic version of the report right there on their desktop. So again, these are basically different forms of electronic submission of the report. They slightly differ in that the electronic transmission includes your QME report attached as an attachment to the email, whereas electronic notification notifies the party by way of email, but then the email contains a hyperlink to which they can retrieve that document. Okay, so they're roughly the same. Both require that you get a specific email address at which the party or party has agreed to accept electronic service. Okay, so sounds great, right? It's going to save time, it's going to save costs, it's going to save effort, it's going to save resources. Well, there's only one little tiny requirement, and that is that electronic service shall only be permitted where the parties agree and a written confirmation of that agreement is made. So you must obtain a written agreement from each of the parties that they are willing to accept electronic submission of the document. So this is part of your new intake procedure when you're gathering the demographics and you're gathering a copy of the panel and you're gathering all of those pieces of data that we talked about that go into scheduling a high quality appointment. This is part of the information that you need. This is part of the data that you need. You need an agreement and a written agreement and an email address at which that party agrees to accept the electronic submission of your report. And it says at the time of giving consent to electronic service, a party or entity shall provide the party's electronic address for the purpose of receiving electronic service. Now that makes sense. There's nothing unique or earth-shattering about this language. It simply makes sense, but what's important is that you maintain in your file written confirmation from all parties of the electronic submission. Now, the electronic submission of reports is a new temporary regulation based on the COVID emergency regulations. And the COVID emergency regulations, which for the first time permitted electronic submission of reports, prohibited electronic service on the unrepresented party or unrepresented injured worker. But that language is now struck, is proposed to be struck from the new proposed changes to the QME regulations. So electronic submission also refers to submission on the unrepresented injured worker. So this is good news. I would simply get an agreement from the injured worker, an agreement to accept the report through electronic submission. And then finally, some standard language from the regulation. Nothing earth-shattering here, but this is part of the language. It tells us that for purposes of electronic service, the medical legal report or other papers must be transmitted to an electronic address maintained by the person or entity on whom it is served, and that makes sense, using the most recent electronic address provided to the physician by the party who consented to accept service electronically, and that simply makes sense. The point is that you must submit it to a unique address, which may be different, not always different. My experience is not always different, but sometimes it is different from the personal address at which the party receives their personal or professional emails. In other words, they may have a dedicated email address simply dedicated to the submission of our medical legal reports. Okay? So good news that is designed to disencumber the report submission process. So doctors, I hope this helps you. You know, if we go all the way back to 2019, November 2019, when the state auditor conducted an audit of the Division of Workers' Compensation, the state auditor found that the Division of Workers' Compensation was failing to ensure, listen to this language, they were failing to ensure, because it's the division's responsibility, right? They were failing to ensure that QMEs produce high quality reports, and they used that specific language, high quality reports. Well, the problem with high quality reports, as identified by the state auditor, is that low quality reports unnecessarily raise costs for the claims payer. And you can see how that could be. They raise costs for the claims payer. And then number two is they introduce unnecessary delays in the resolution of claims and cases. And you could see how that could be as well. If the parties have to go back to the qualified medical evaluator 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, on and on again, and then depose the qualified medical evaluator and have him write supplemental reports, him or her write supplemental reports, and all of this second and third and fourth cycles of action raise costs and introduce delays in the resolution of cases. So the state auditor concluded that if the content and quality and usability and substantiability of QME reports could be improved, right? Big project, right? But if 3,500 qualified medical evaluators can come together and start to produce better quality reports, the system will function much more smoothly. The system will be lubricated by high quality grease, the high quality grease meaning good reports that resolve disputed issues. So the Division of Workers' Compensation began a series of steps with just that intention, to improve QME reports, which would have the trickle-down effect of improving the system, of reducing costs of the resolution of cases, and would quickly bring cases to an accurate conclusion quickly, with emphasis on the word quickly and without delay. So the purpose of these new QME regulations is to do just that, is to reduce delays. And I love electronic submission because it allows us as qualified medical evaluators to quickly get the reports out. It reduces the time involved in printing, mailing. What does it take, 2-3 days for mail to bring the report? 2-3 days across millions of reports. Millions of reports is a substantial expediting of these cases. So the purpose of the new QME regulations is to reduce delays, to reduce costs by improving the content and quality of QME reports. And I shared with you in this discussion those specific sections of the new proposed changes to the QME regulations that intend to do just that. And it's my opinion that each one of these new proposed changes will succeed in its objective and will result in better quality reports if you'll just follow the regulation. And I encourage you to read the QME regulations periodically, perhaps twice a year. I like to read the QME regulations about twice a year because every time I read the QME regulations, I read them with new eyes. I read them with a new understanding. And each time I go through the QME regulations, it improves my evaluations, and it'll do the same for you. So I encourage you to read the QME regulations a couple times a year to familiarize yourself with what it is that a high-quality evaluator does and how a high-quality evaluator behaves. It will do nothing but improve your reputation as a competent and qualified medical evaluator. So doctors, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on this discussion. I look forward to being with you on our next discussion as well. And for now, I'm wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.